So here we are again looking at percentages. Now, last lesson we talked about the meaning of percentages, and we're going to be going over that again today. We're going to recap the fractional equivalent of common percentages. That means what fraction is the same size as our most common percentages that we use. And we looked at calculating a percentage of an amount using fractions. Now, we're not going to go any further than that today, but we are going to practice it, and we're going to go a little bit further with our non-calculator work. And then next time, we're going to look at calculating a percentage using a calculator. Okay, so just because we're using the word calculate doesn't mean we're using a calculator. We're calculating using our mental skills. So let's recap on what we did last lesson. So, percent means, remember, per means out of, and cent means 100. So it means out of 100. And the way that we can write that, remember, is we can put our percentage over 100. So that means out of 100. So we're just going to go over the percentages that we looked at last lesson and remind ourselves what fractions they are. So if you want to pause the video just now and see how many of these you can remember, that would be a good idea. And then come back in a second and check that you're right. So 50% is a half. 10% is a tenth. 25% is a quarter. And 33 1/3% is a third. I would say this left-hand column here, these ones are the most important ones to be able to remember. And then 75% is 3/4, 20% is 1/5, 30% is 3/10, and 66 2/3% is 2/3. Now remember, don't panic, because if you can't remember these, you can always put your percentage out of 100 and simplify your fraction. So for example, 20% means 20 out of 100. And if we simplify that fraction, we can divide top and bottom by 10 to start with, because we just clock off a 0, don't we, if we're dividing by 10. So we get 2 over 10, and they're both in the 2 times table. So dividing top and bottom by 2 gives us 1/5. So you see, all these different topics that we do, they tie in with each other in lots of different ways. So when we've done simplifying fractions, we maybe didn't know at the time that we would need to use that when we were working out percentages, but here we are needing it. Okay, so they are our common percentages, and they're what you really, really need to either know or be able to work out. But I would say this left-hand column here, these guys are very, very important, and you do need to learn them. Okay, so let's recap how we work out a percentage of an amount. So 20% of £13.55. So 20%, if we look back, is the same size as 1/5 of £13.55. So if we're going to work out 1/5 of anything, remember we need to divide it by 5. So it's £13.55 divided by 5. And we would need to do that as a bus stop calculation. So 5 into 1 doesn't go, so we just carry the 1. We can put a 0 here if we want to, but we don't need that. 5 into 13, there's 2 5s in 13 and 3 left over. We've got to remember when we're dividing to keep our points in line. 5 into 35 goes 7 times, and 5 into 5 goes once. So 1/5 of £13.55 is £2.71. So remember, you just find the equivalent fraction and then you work it out. You work out the fraction of the amount. And remember the rule, to find a fraction of an amount, you divide by the bottom and times by the top. So remember that rule for finding a fraction of an amount. Okay, so I would like you to practice these questions. If you're still not sure what you're doing, hang about and I'll go through the first couple. But if you know what you're doing, just pause the video, do it yourself, and then skip to the bit where the answers are. Okay? So 50%, what I'm going to do, oops, Daisy. What I'm going to do with all of these is go through them first of all and write down what fraction I'm working out, because that might be enough information for you to get going on it. So 50% is a half. 25% is a quarter. 10% is a tenth. 75% is 3/4. 66 2/3% is 2/3. And 30% is 3/10. So remember, divide by the bottom times by the top. Although if the top's 1, like it is here, here, and here, then there's only dividing to do. There's no multiplying required. Okay, so if that's enough for you, pause the video. If not, pay attention. So we're going to do 18 divided by 2 for this one, because we need to find a half. For the next one, we're doing 30 divided by 4, because we've got 4 on the bottom. For this one, it's 250 divided by 10. For the next one, we're doing 80 divided by 4 and then times 3. For number 5, we need 2/3. So we're doing 120 divided by the bottom, so divided by 3 times by the top. And for the last one, divide by 10 times by 3. Remember, divide by the bottom times by the top. So that's how we're going to work these out. Now we're going to do it. 18 divided by 2 is 9, so it's 9 kilograms. 30 divided by 4. Remember, a good way of dividing by 4 is to half it and half it again. So a half of 30 pounds is 15 pounds. And if you half that again, half of 15 pounds is 7 pounds 50. 250 divided by 10 is 25, so that's 25 metres. 80 divided by 4, again, half it and half it again. So half of 80 is 40, and if you half that, you get 20. So 20 times 3 is 60, so that's 60 people. Number 5, 120 divided by 3. If you want, you can just do a bus stop sum to get 120 divided by 3, and you get 40, which when you times by 2, you get 80 cows. And then the last one, 1,800 divided by 10 is 180. When we times that by 3, we get 540 pupils. Okay, so we've practiced finding the most common percentages of amounts, and we're being very careful to put our unit on with our answer. So you should always check back when you write down an answer, check that you have included the correct units. Now, I have a question for us to think about. How could we find 5%? Okay, now we've looked at our common percentages, remember? 5 wasn't one of them. So I want you to be having a think just now. We're not going to go over this just now. I want you to be having a think about how you could find 5%. And we'll bear that in mind later on. So, what I would like you to do just now is pause the video and try these questions. So it's more practice at finding common percentages of amounts. So just pick a column, first, second or third, and answer the questions from that column. Remember, if you're stuck with anything, you can pop back into the lesson or you can ask an adult nearby. Just don't be stuck. Make sure you do ask for help. So I'll show you the answers now. So you can pause and check your answers. Right, now I'd like us to think about non-calculator percentages. So we've done lots of practice today, but I want us to think now about combinations of 5% and 10%. So we need to go back to that question that I asked a few minutes ago of how might we find 5%? Now, if we look back at our common percentages and the fraction equivalents, which ones of these, or which one of these would be the most help when we were looking for 5%? Well, isn't 5% just going to be a half of 10%? Does that make sense? I think that does. So if we want to find 5%, we can just find 10% and half it. So 5% is half of 10%. So that's one of the ways, and I think that's the easiest way of finding 5%. Now, let's have a look at these. How would we find 90%? What I want us to do when we're thinking about these is relate everything back to 10%, because 10% is easy to find because we can just divide by 10. Okay, we can do that without any bus stop calculations, because remember, all we're doing when we're dividing by 10 is moving our digits one place to the right past the decimal point if that's needed. Okay, so to find 90%, if we know 10%, how would we find 90%? Two different ways. We could either do 10% and times it by 9, or we could do the full amount, which is 100%, and we could take off 10%. So that's an alternative way that we will be thinking about later on. 40%, let's think about that. All to do with 10%, remember? So if we can find 10%, we could just times it by 4, couldn't we? And that would give us 40%. Now, what about 15%? How could we use 10% to find 15%? Well, if we get 10%, we need to add another 5% on, don't we, to get 15%. So 5%, remember, is half of 10%. So we could do 10%, which is nice and easy, and then add a half of 10%. And that would give us 15%, because we'd get 10% here and 5% there. So thinking about 35%, how could we work that out from 10%? Well, to get our 30, we'd need to do 10% times 3. And then to get 5%, we're finding a half of 10%, aren't we? So if we added those two together, if we did 10% times 3, that would give us 30% here. And then if we did a half of 10%, that would give us 5%. So we add them together and we're going to get 35%. Okay, and then 65%, we would need 60% and 5%. So we could find 10% and times it by 6, that would give us a 60%. And then a half of 10%, that will give us the 5%, and we can add them together. 60% and 5% is 65%. So we're going to look at a few examples of that just now, not very many. We're just going to do these 3 examples and I'm going to get you to practice a bit. Okay, so 90% of 310 kilometres. So first of all, let's think about our strategy, how we're going to do this. So if we want 90%, let's start with 10% and then we can times that by 9, can't we? So 10% of 310 is 310 divided by 10. So remember, if you think about your columns, units, tens, hundreds, thousands, then comes the decimal point, tenths, hundredths, and so on. So 310 is there, and when we move everything one place to the right, the 3 goes there, the 1 goes there, The 0 goes into the tenths column, but remember this is where the decimal point is, so it's 31. Also, you should know that if you are dividing a number that ends in 0 by 10, you just lose the 0. So what we're finding out really is, so 10% is 31, and we're going to times that by 9. So we're doing 31 times 9. So 1 times 9 is 9, 3 times 9 is 27, nothing to carry. So we've got 279, so our answer is 279 kilometres. All right, next, 15% of £22.40. Again, start with 10%. What are you going to do with your 10%? Well, we need to add 5% to it, don't we, to get 15%. So we're going to do 10% and then add a half of 10%. So we need to find 10%. So 10%, £22.40. Again, let's just use these columns. £22.40 would go there. 10% dividing by 10, move everything to the right one column. So we get 2, 2, 4. We don't need the 0 on the end there, but we do need the decimal point. So £22.40, when you divide it by 10, is £2.24. So we can say 10% is £2.24. A half of 10%, that's going to give us 5%, isn't it? So a half of £2.24, well, half of £2 is £1. A half of 24 is 12. So we've got 10% and 5%. So we just need to add them together to get 15%. So we get 3.36. Remember, our question was about money. So 15% of £22.40 is £3.36. And the last one that we're going to do for an example just now is 35%. So this is the most complex one that we're going to look at today. So we're going to have to find 10% and we're going to get 30% from that. So we're going to have to times it by 3. That'll give us 30%. We're still going to need 5%. So that means we'll still need a half of 10%. So we need to start off with our 10%, don't we? So when we find 10%, it's a tenth. So we're dividing by 10. 160 divided by 10. Move all your figures one place to the right or just chop off the 0. You get 16. So we need to get 30% by doing 10%, which is 16, times 3. So 6 3s are 18. 1 3 is 3. Add the 1 makes 4. So 16 times 3 is 48. That's 30%. Okay, now we need a half of 10%. So remember, 10% is the 16. So we need a half of 16, which is 8. I'm not going to put the add there because that doesn't make sense. So we're going to say that our 5% is 8. So 35% is 48 plus 8, because it's 30% and 5%, which gives us 56. And we must remember our pound sign because we started off with an amount of pounds. Okay, so we will have chance to practice more of this at other times, but what I want you to do just now is try these ones. So these are not as complicated as the ones that we just looked at. So the first 4 are just 5%. So remember that 10% you divide by 10. 5% you find in a half of 10%. Okay, remember 30% is 3 lots of 10%. And 90% is 9 lots of 10%. So pause the video, try all those just now. Then come back in a minute and check your answers. So there are your answers. So pause the video again and just check those. Check that you've got them right. If you're not sure about any of it, please remember, just dip back into the lesson and ask for help or ask an adult who's nearby. And then Next time, we're going to look at calculating with a calculator. And then if we just recap, we're still up to here, but we've moved on from finding very basic percentages using fractions to finding more difficult percentages using fractions. So a bit of light relief for us next lesson when we're going to use a calculator. Okay, well done. See you soon.